So in this section, we started with tracks and clips, talked about the difference between the two, a clip being a portion, the track being everything that's on that row. We then looked at how we would order our tracks, inserting tracks, deleting tracks, moving our audio to the bottom. We then looked at protecting our tracks to lock them or disable them so that they can't be edited later on in the process. We then looked at the importance of undo and redo and how we'll use that on a regular basis, Control Z and Control Y respectively. You'll also remember my recommendation for making multiple projects, which ended up saving me a ton of time just yesterday because I went ahead and I made some changes and lost some previous work. So undo and redo will take you so far, but create a new project with a new revision. So whatever your project title is, maybe put Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3, as you're creating multiple projects to protect yourself from any changes later on that you might not be able to go back to. We then looked at using copy and paste, so we can take some content, whether that's a single clip or everything in the timeline, and move that or copy it and paste it to another section. We also looked at inserting time at the beginning. If there's not enough room, we can insert time to make room for what we're copying and pasting. We then talked about transitions, and I said fade is the one that's the most common. It's the one that I recommend that you use. Of course, there are a few others you could use, like fade through black or slide left and slide right if you need to. Those transitions are applied. We just grab them. We use the T key to find the transitions, then drag it down. Anywhere where it's highlighted, that'll be a place where you can apply that transition. We then looked at the duration of the transition. We can go in and use the resizing handles to make that duration longer or shorter. We also looked at going up to edit and then down to preferences to change that default transition duration. And then lastly, we wrapped up with our cursor effects. We looked at changing the basic effect, like making the arrow larger or smaller. We also made it more transparent or more opaque. And then we added effects. So maybe we wanted to highlight around it, or we needed to magnify what was around it, or dim everything else that's around that cursor. And then we also looked at applying it to every one of those recording files. We remember we can only apply it to the recording files, and then select everything in that row, drag that effect down, and then it applies to everything in that track. We then looked at cursor effects. We looked at the basic cursor effects, like making your arrow a little bit larger or a little smaller, or changing its transparency to make it less opaque or more opaque. We then added additional effects. We put a highlight around it, or you could magnify it, or you could have a left click that would have a ripple effect whenever you were clicking on it. Each of those, we said we would just grab a transition by going to the T key or hitting the transitions link in the tools panel and then dragging it down to the clip that we wanted to apply it to. We remember the clip has to be a recording file, and it probably makes the most sense to grab every clip in that track. So grab all, select all of the recording files in that track, drag it down to one, and it applies that effect across all of them.